What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to Bring the Juice. Your guy Cody here, along with my friend from the Factually Football Podcast, Adam Hensley. Adam, well, we had this idea to do this podcast, and then the Colts come out today and they decide to bench Matt Ryan for Sam Ellinger. So there is a new QB1 in town. So that kind of partially answers one of the questions that we're going to answer today. Not fully, clearly, but how are you doing? First off, what are your initial reactions to this news that now the Colts have, at one point, their third quarterback listed on their depth chart is now their QB1 and Sam Ellinger?
Yeah, I'm going to go two thoughts, and then we can obviously go down either path. But so my initial thought is it seems like Frank Reich's blaming the players for performance, which I don't think is the case. That's my initial knee jerk. When you make a move at QB1, you're saying it's a player-based issue, and I think it's a schema and a coaching staff-based issue. And second of all, I think Chris Ballard probably needs to answer for if you make a move to a QB1 that was already on your roster and you gave away so much it wasn't a massive amount, right? Other people gave away more to get other veteran quarterbacks, but you gave away stuff and you had a guy on your roster. So if we are going with what Frank Reich says, they both need to answer for those is my knee jerk.
For sure. I definitely understand what you're saying. It's kind of funny, like him or hate him, Greg Doyle did bring up a good point. It's like, how is your quarterback? How is he third on your depth chart? And now all of a sudden he's become your starter, all in the span of a couple months here. I mean, that is a legitimate question. I think that is a legitimate question there. And so kind of bringing into kind of the topic of this episode here is I put out a tweet earlier today, obviously before the Ellinger news. How would you put these in order of issues for the 2022 Indianapolis Colts? I listed three options. We kind of touched on each one of them here: GM, coaching staff, and players. And so I figured we could kind of just dive right into it. Although I kind of know, I think where you're going to go with this, Adam. Being a coach yourself, you understand a lot of this stuff. That probably a lot of us don't, who have never really coached. At any level. If you had to put it right now, we saw the Colts make a move, a player move, but if you had to put it from number 3 all the way to number 1, where would you rank these three in terms of problem?
I think your biggest problem to start at the top down, I think is coach. I think it's schema. As we talked about on our podcast, it's been a couple of weeks ago now. If you actually look at Frank Reich statistically over his tenure as a coach, other than the year they went to the Super Bowl in Philly, I think we homered it a little bit here. We thought he was the next Messiah. We thought he was the right answer. But let's not forget he was our second choice. There's probably a reason he was our second choice. And unfortunately, that fruit is coming to bear itself right now, in my opinion. Schemas are what makes the game. At the end of the day, the players make the plays, but you've got to put them in the right position to make the plays. I think if we want to look any further than the defense, I don't know that we even need to. The defense is doing everything in their power. There was not an offensive touchdown scored this week, and we still lost a football game. Yet we have a supposed offensive genius as a head coach who's so smart he won't allow anyone else to call the plays, and he calls all the plays, yet we're not scoring points. To me, I think it starts and stops there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of had a couple thoughts. I think the first one was exactly what you said, right? If it's very, very, I don't know the word, I guess. It's very, it really goes after Frank Reich, I guess, and it really is to his detriment. If the defense was struggling, okay, you have an excuse a little bit more. You have a little bit more wiggle room, but it's your unit. The reason you got brought in is the reason this team is not winning football games. That's my thought, is you can't get away from yourself and what you claim are your strengths. If your strengths are actually the weaknesses of the team, that tells me that you are part of the issue, of this football team being where it's at right now. You look at all the statistics, the Colts are one of, if not the worst offense in the NFL right now. And you've brought in so many other veteran quarterbacks, which I think also talk about the GM, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But your offense just, let's be honest, it just stinks right now. Yeah. And the big thing that really frustrates me and irritates me, Adam, is I don't think from a pure talent standpoint, this Colts offense is a bad offense. I mean, you have Michael Pittman, you have Jonathan Taylor, you have Alec Pierce, you have Paris Campbell, you have Naheem Hines, you have Jelani Woods, you have Kylan Granson, all guys who have proven when they've gotten opportunities, they've proven they can make plays. I mean, these guys all have, and you just don't use them. I mean, even yesterday against Tennessee, you did not use your tight ends at all. And this is a unit, a group collectively that had over 100 yards against Tennessee a couple weeks ago. And you just flat out don't refuse to use them for some strange reason. And it's just different things like that. We've seen it through the years of Naheem Hines just not getting involved for some strange reason. When your offense was sputtering, you just didn't get him involved. And JT only 10 carries yesterday. Like just things like that just make you scratch your head. And it's like, it almost seems like, Adam, the Colts and Frank Reich make it so much more difficult on themselves than it should be as an offense.
Yeah, it just feels like it's next excuse down the line. You and I were texting before this podcast today, and like, I didn't do it because I'm not an audio editing genius, but I literally want to take all of the losses that we have. I want to, and the tie, because to me that's a loss. I'm a man. You win or you lose. I apologize if that offends anyone, but like you either win or lose. You can't get a tie. So take all 4 of those losses. I feel like the excuse is exactly the same, but the problem still remains. Like now it's a Sam Ehlinger versus Matt Ryan thing. Before, Jonathan wasn't getting the traction, which is the whole reason they didn't run him in the one game last time that he had 10 carries. Well, he averaged 6 yards a carry. At one point, it was we weren't getting enough separation. Credit to my buddy Matt Morris. He sent me a thing in week 3 or 4. The Colts have 2 of the top 10 people in route separation in the NFL. And at that point, Paris Campbell was number 8 and Kylan Granson was number 2. And that was in week 3 or 4. So it just feels like he's got this excuse tree he's working down, when in reality, isn't putting himself on the chopping block. I think he's crying for Jim Irsay to do what he knows Irsay should do, which is there's no reason Frank Reich should have delivered that press conference today, and it shouldn't have been Jim Irsay saying, we've decided to take a different direction. I don't even know where you go. I don't have an answer there from a head coaching standpoint, but you've got to cut the cancer out. And for me to allow a guy to stay in position that isn't executing and keeps a guy like Matt Pryor in, who consistently is underperforming no matter what metric you want to measure him on, and refuses to go away from him, so much so that they're going to move a guy like Braden Smith out of his Pro Bowl position to put him in a different position only to keep Matt Pryor to attack. Like, it just, to me, is overwhelmingly like data-driven based. He's a problem. And it's very unfortunate that Mr. Irsay has yet to step up and say, that's it. I hear you, fans. We appreciate you, season ticket holders, which I know my family is, and you are as well, Cody. I'm concerned that he's going to cause a baseball strike style issue for Colts fans to go to games in the future. It's getting to that point, I think, with this regime.
I hope it doesn't get to that point, because that would just be very unfortunate, for everybody involved. But yeah, I mean, it's been a consistent issue, like I've had qualms with Reich in the past, and the offense has generally been good enough to win, right? And for the most part, so I haven't really those haven't really come to anything. And every play caller has issues at times, but it seems like for whatever reason, Adam, basically the Jacksonville game last year all the way to here, this offense just has not picked up the slack. And people are regressing. Players that were once Pro Bowl, All-Pro players, they are regressing, and you can throw in the injury, which I get that. There's some guys who are injured, getting a little bit older, but at the same time, how can all these guys who played at Pro Bowl, All-Pro levels only like a year or two ago all of a sudden be playing so poorly? I think to me that has to say this is a coaching issue too, because you can't have all these players playing poorly, including Kenny Moore in that conversation. So I don't really understand how that can happen and how the drop off, if it's a player or two, I get it. It happens. But if it's like 3, 4, 5 players, to me, that screams less about the players. Well, the players do have to take, accountability. Also, it's a coaching issue as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it goes back to the same statement about Ursay, right? I just had this conversation with another coach of mine the other day. We were talking about how you build competitive nature, how do you build culture around a football program, and I think taking that into this scenario, if you don't set a accountability culture from day one, which is what the Colts have preached, but then the facts show that they don't have accountability culture because Frank has a job when he fails and he doesn't pass the play calling off when his offense doesn't do well. I think it starts to trickle down. I think inherently some of these players that are regressing because they don't feel like it's play well or lose your spot or play well or lose your job no matter what it is. It's like he says the one thing that he says in his presser all the time. We evaluate every player on every play and da 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 da. It's the same thing, literally. Record, rinse, and repeat. But the reality is the main person who's saying that is the person that's never held accountable. So as a player, if I see that, do I start to wonder, well, if I have a few bad plays, is it going to matter? What's that going to look like? And I got to be honest, it starts to trickle down. And I don't even know I don't know if he's putting the guys in the position to win all the time. I mean, we saw what happened this week with Paris Campbell, 10 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. Did Paris run a route any different? I highly doubt it. Did he do what he's done every single week? Probably. So explain to me why this week he got 10 catches and there's weeks where he's had no catches and no targets. Like it's just the inconsistency in the way that people handle themselves in day to day. And this is part of me in my sales role. Like the inconsistency of individuals and the way they interact on a day to day basis carries over in so many areas. And I feel like Frank Reich's inconsistency and lack to jump to the next new fad or be the next smart guy has carried over into our team's performance. And that to me it's a fireable offense. It would be if I did it at my job. I mean, if you didn't help the kids consistently at your job, right? If you weren't the consistent leader and the consistent Christian staple that you are for your kids at your job, would you have your job? Probably not.
What's going on, everybody? Today, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, BetStamp. Now, I know what you're thinking. Derek, another betting app? What is so different about this one now? Well, I got to tell you guys, I'm not into online gambling a whole lot and bets online and everything, but I got to tell you, BetStamp is one of the coolest things I have ever seen in regards to betting online. The great thing about BetStamp is it allows you to see all the different odds from all different sports books and see which one provides you the best odds possible for any game or scenario you want to bet on for your pick versus some of the worst. BetStamp allows you to also buy and sell picks that you have without worrying about losing your money or having any issues with it. Believe me, it's all free. I mean, look at this, guys. You have an option for every game across all different kinds of leagues in a ton of different ways. You have baseball, you have college football, UFC, NBA, and NFL. Great for the NFL season now being here. And if I wanted to bet on this Tennessee Titans versus Buffalo Bills game, it shows me in real time what are the best odds, which sports book I'm going to get the best offer from versus some of the worst ones. Because why would you want to earn less money from PointsBet when you could be winning more from ProLine Plus? Again, a great thing that BetStamp offers you, allowing you to make more money for the same pick just with a different sports book. How easy is that? And the great thing is there's not just games. There's player props. There's game props. There's lines. There's live tracking. There's a ton of great ways to make bets and picks on BetStamp, guys. Totally a cool thing to use. I highly encourage you check it out if you're into any kind of online betting. Even if you're not, give it a check. See what you like about it, because I think I actually enjoy using it. But the best way to get an edge on online sports betting is having multiple accounts at different sports books. Be sure to hit the BetLink page, betstamp.app/onboarding. Be sure to check out the BetStamp app or online, and be sure to use the referral code JUICE, plug in your state, and you'll get access to all their affiliates and their prices once you open it up, seeing all states lines. Be sure to check this out, guys. You won't want to miss it for the best odds on your next sports bet.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that goes for any job, right? Like, you have to do your job well to keep your job. And you're right. I mean, I think it trickles down to the locker room as well, right? We've seen it, like just this. And it's funny, Adam, because for as much as the Colts preach about the locker room, it seems like recently the locker room's kind of stunk in Indianapolis. Like, no guys are holding guys accountable. They talked all the time. They talked about lack of accountability, right? After last season. And they were like, we're going to get guys that are going to hold people accountable. And the same issues are happening and nothing is being done to fix it. To me, that's still an accountability problem. And you've changed coaches, you've changed personnel, but the same thing that's been consistent through it all has been the head coach. And to me, you're right. I mean, I think there's no other excuse. And people try to just say, well, give Frank this, give Frank that. I mean, you've given Frank different things. The only thing you really haven't given him, right, is a guy that you've drafted at quarterback. That's like literally the only thing you haven't given him. But the team just now, it seems like this locker room, it's trickled down into its head coach and what this identity is, and it's just a team full of excuses. Yeah. This is a team full of excuses, a team that's not willing to hold each other accountable, and especially on the offense, right? Especially on the offense, just an issue. And the fact that the Colts won't make moves, like why is Matt Pryor even touching the field still? There's no reason for that to happen, So it just continues to trickle down. What would be your number two then? If you had to say number one was the head coach and the coaching staff in general, what would be your number two?
I would say GM. We talk about personnel. Thanks for the tee up. We talk about personnel, right? And those decisions. And there's a million different conspiracy theories out there about the Ballard and Wright connection and all of that good stuff. But like, as a GM, your job is to put the best group of players together. And I think the Colts have done a really good job of assembling a very morally sound team. I think that we haven't addressed the football product on the field as much as we've addressed the moral compass that our players have had. I think it started with Tony Dungy bringing that in, which to me must start at the Irsay family. I don't know. I'm not that involved with the organization day to day. But to me, that is one thing that stayed fairly consistent. It seems to be a fairly God-driven program. I really do kind of denote that to when Tony Dungy was here. Got away from that a little bit with the Picano crew. But, I mean, everybody's still been like a moral compass, great person or player. And I think it's almost gone to a neglect fact of the product they're putting on the football field. Now, I'm not saying go to your local jail and pick out the best football player and put him on your team. I'm not going that direction. But at some point, I think Chris Ballard has made the right moral decision for how his players act off the field. And he's grossly underrated what that translates to on the field.
I think even not using free agency, when you need it to, sometimes you dip into it, but you need to dip into it more. Like you've needed to dip into it more in the past. And then even like neglecting your own guys that were key parts of your team, right? I mean, you even think from last year, the transitions the Colts have made, right, in terms of replacing players. I mean, my goodness, you go from Rocky Sin, who's one of the best young corners in the league, you replace him with Brandon Faison, essentially. You go from Mark Glowinski, who is one of the better guards in the league, and you replace him with Danny Penter, who's been benched. And then, it goes on and on. Like, you let guys like Danico Autry walk. Like, you let key guys go that really would have helped you out. And in my mind, you failed to address two of the most important positions in all of football, Matt, and all of football, Adam, and that being the quarterback and that being the left tackle. I mean, how in the world did the media and people let Chris Ballard get away with selling Matt Pryor at left tackle? It's baffling to me.
Because we're too nice. Yeah. We didn't have enough Doyle in us. Right? I appreciate Doyle's statement today. I'm not usually a huge Doyle fan, so I'm not going to come in here and act like I usually am. But I love it because I think he said exactly what we're all thinking as fans and as people who report on the team. Frank, I'm confused. 9 days ago, you told us Sam Ehlinger wasn't the number one guy. And that's a Chris and Frank decision, right? I mean, that is a personnel-based decision. So they thought enough of him to keep him on the roster, and then they didn't think enough of him to bench him in favor of Nick Foles. And then they thought enough of him to raise him above Foles, but not Ryan. And now all of a sudden, a week later, he's the best thing since sliced bread, and he's always had something special.
Yeah.
Well, which one is it? How can you not be consistent? And he was in-house. Why did you play Russian roulette with all the different quarterbacks? Why'd you let Jacob Eason go? I mean, I'm not saying Jacob Eason's a better example here, but like it to me says this isn't about drafting Frank Reich a quarterback because he hasn't shown the ability to develop guys back to where they were in their career prior to coming here. He supposedly was this great quarterback whisperer, right? And I think Chris Ballard, and that's why I put him second, I think he's taken a back seat a little bit to Frank. And it's almost like he's getting that order pushed down of like, hey, we really trust where Frank's going. We really trust where Frank's going. You got to follow his vision. And so I think some of that blame maybe goes on Ballard. You know, I wouldn't discount backdoor conversations around, oh, you got to keep this guy, blah, blah, blah. I mean, have you seen who we're talking about trading for right now? Austin Corbett, the right guard out of Carolina, and getting Chris Reed back. If I'm not mistaken, I think actually at one point Austin Corbett was on our roster, or he was on our radar, and we didn't sign him.
Yeah.
So, again, that's the only reason I put Ballard second. It feels like the organizational chart is a little askew here. It feels like it almost goes Irsay, head coach, GM.
Yeah, and then of course the players need to be held accountable too, because I mean the players are not performing offensively at all. I mean certain players, not every player, because certain players are like Matt Ryan was not holding up his end of the bargain. I get he was getting hit a lot. The offensive line was terrible. All those offensive linemen were playing bad. But Matt Ryan, look at all the turnovers. He was costing the team. Like even yesterday, throwing that pick six, just things like that. 3 turnovers again from him. Like. It's just like the players were not holding up their end of the bargain. Like Frank Reich said, we told Matt, we didn't hold up our end of the bargain, which is true, but Matt also didn't hold up his end of the bargain either. So, I mean, I think, players need to be held accountable just as much as anybody, especially this offensive line and this quarterback, because you are paying these guys a ton of money to be the worst offense in the NFL. That is unbelievable. And that's inexcusable.
Well, and I think when you have put it in that offensive line's hands the last couple of weeks, in fairness, I think, Matt Ryan got pressure on him, but they can't control, short of Quentin Nelson doing what he did the one year that you have the soundbite of him going over to the sideline saying, run the ball, RTDB, right? Mm-hmm. You have that visual clip. I mean, short of him doing that, they gave their running back 10 carries. He got 6 yards a carry, and they didn't use him more than 10 times. Yet they had Nyheim Hines in on a second and goal from the 4-yard line. You really think Nyheim Hines is going to break through that line better than Jonathan Taylor? Because that's what you're telling your team. You're telling your team they don't have the ability to block somebody at that point. And Nyheim Hines' receiving ability is more important than Jonathan Taylor's running ability. What's that tell you if you're a player?
Ugh. Just awful. Just awful all the way around. There's no way. And I feel bad for this defense because the defense is playing like a playoff defense. That's the unfortunate part. So I feel for some of these guys like the Buckners and the Gilmores who are playing at a very high level. I mean, the rest of this defense too, that this offense just simply is not holding up its end of the bargain due to a lot of factors, all three, honestly, the GM, the coach, and the players. So unless you had anything else, Adam, I think that about covers it, kind of talking about all three of these where we'd kind of rank them. We have coach number 1, GM, and then the players. Any other thoughts, Adam, before we hop off of here?
Not really. I mean, just to kind of dovetail off your defensive statement, one of the concerns I have is we've got some players coming into contract years. This is overall, not just on defense, but I don't think that the defensive players should be unfairly judged by the overall team performance. We've got a lot of younger guys coming out, right? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, isn't Isaiah Rodgers coming close to a contract? I think Okariki's coming close. We've got a lot of guys that are coming into pivotal years from a, yes, our offense isn't performing, but make sure team, Chris Ballard, I'm going to cut Ballard and Reich out of it. Make sure Jim Irsay, you pay the guys who have given you the performance and are the moral compasses off the field. Don't just pay them to be a moral compass. We've seen how that goes. And unfortunately, offensively, we're on that right now. That's my big concern, is that the wrong people are going to bear the brunt of, in fairness, a 5-year run of mediocrity.
Yeah. I mean, you look at this regime, right? 0 division titles, never won an opening game, and he made the playoffs twice and won 1 playoff game. Like, that's just honestly not good enough. Frank Reich said it in his presser. That's not good enough. Your expectation is championship level. Every single year you're competing for a Super Bowl, and this team hasn't even really come close, if we're being completely honest, because they've neglected some important positions, because they haven't put their players in the right positions, and because the players simply haven't performed either at certain points. So all 3 of those factor into this, but we kind of guys wanted to just talk about the 3 reasons, kind of give our ranking of these 3. And let's be honest, guys, I think I can speak for you, Adam, as well. As Colts fans, we don't want to be on here talking about this. That's the last thing we want to be talking about. But that's kind of where we're at, man. That's kind of where this team is at right now. And I guess, kind of flipping it to a positive here with Sam Ehlinger, we'll see, man. Maybe he does turn out to be something that the Colts like a hidden gem. And if he's not, you get your franchise quarterback, ideally for the first time in a long time. So, all right, guys, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support. Been cranking out a lot of content today. Thank you, Adam, for coming on. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure. Guys, be sure to go check out our other channel over at Factually Football. I will drop a link in the description, so be sure to go subscribe to that. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.
Have a good week all.